One of the huge challenges we have in our day is just keeping a sense of hope. There are so many people that are down in the dumps and so worried about where this world is going. Like, are we all hurtling towards an impending doom? Well, okay, it kind of looks like it, but the message of Isaiah is one of hope. Hope for the future of what Jesus Christ is going to do in his millennial reign and with his saints. People that are willing to follow him can be part of the process of helping everybody else and bringing hope to the earth. But ultimately, our hope is in Jesus Christ. Again, the message of Isaiah. So we are knee deep or maybe neck deep in Isaiah in the Book of Mormon right now, as there's a big chunk of quoted material from Isaiah. So let's go ahead and get started with 2 Nephi chapter 21. And if you want to stick around to the end, I have a very special treat. It's a quote by an individual outside of the church that has some praise for the Book of Mormon that you might really like. So without further introduction, let's go ahead and hop on to chapter 21. And as you know from other videos, if you've watched, there's a whole section of, I think, 13 or so videos that we're in the middle of, or chapters that we're in the middle of, that are all Isaiah quotes. So, okay, the stem of Jesse, this is the little italicized summary. The stem of Jesse, which is Christ, will judge in righteousness. The knowledge of God will cover the earth in the millennium. The Lord will raise an ensign and gather Israel. And this is similar to Isaiah chapter 11 in the Bible. All right, verse 1. And there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. And the Spirit of the Lord shall rest upon him, and the Spirit of wisdom and understanding, the Spirit of counsel and might, the Spirit of knowledge and of the fear of the Lord, and shall make him quick of understanding in the fear of the Lord, and he shall not judge after the sight of his eyes, neither reprove after the hearing of his ears, but with righteousness shall he judge the poor, and reprove with equity the meek of the earth. And he shall smite the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall slay the wicked. And I just have a note here that's interesting. This verse about the righteousness shall the Lord God judge the poor and reprove with equity. That whole verse we just read, it also shows up in nine chapters from now in 2 Nephi 30. So that's pretty cool to know. It's a great verse. And all of this is talking about Jesus Christ. And if we want to pattern our lives after Christ, as, you know, most certainly we hopefully want to do that, we want to not only feel hope and joy in knowing that this is how he is, but it's also a way that we want to try to become. So a couple of things that jump out here is he will not judge after the sight of his eyes, nor reprove after the hearing of his ears. That reminds me of the Old Testament verse that says, God doesn't look at your height or your countenance. He doesn't look at your external. He looks upon the heart. He does not judge after how the world judges. He judges based on a person's heart, their intent, their character, who they really are deep down inside. And I think that is, hard to do unless you're really trying. It's a daily effort to see beyond the exterior if somebody seems grumpy or rude or whatever. And I'm not perfect at this at all. I pray a lot for righteous judgment, for the ability to discern, what's underneath. And of course, I struggle and fail in that, but I think it's a noble effort that we want to try to see beyond that exterior so we can see the heart, because the exterior package often fools people. And we are not always what we appear, right? And so we want to be able to see others with the heart that God would have us see them with, to see them with God's eyes. I think that's really an aspect of charity. And then he judges the meek and the poor with righteousness. I love that. You don't have to be afraid of your image with Jesus Christ. He can see you and what you're laboring under. He sees your specific circumstances with righteousness and mercy. Okay. And righteousness shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his reins. I love how it uses this imagery about the clothing, the girdle being his righteousness and his faithfulness. Is there like holding his clothing together, binding him. This is a key aspect of his character. Verse 6, the wolf also shall dwell with the lamb, and the leopard shall lie down with the kid, and the calf and the young lion and the fatling together, and a little child shall lead them. So of course, this is talking about the millennial era, when there will be peace on the earth, even amongst animals. And I look forward to that. I think that's exciting to think of, instead of going and seeing an animal at a zoo and there has to be a thick layer of glass or a sturdy fence between you and the animal, you could just go hang out with that animal and pet it, talk to it. Wouldn't it be cool if you could understand what it was saying? Supposedly in the millennial era, we'll be able to, or maybe it's in the next life we'll be able to, but at some point we'll be able to talk to animals and hear what they have to say. And it will be a wonderful and beautiful time to talk to these innocent, soulful creatures that bring us so much joy. But sometimes they're scary, like I wouldn't want to be next to a wolf or a wolverine or anything like that. But, when they calm down a little bit, then it'll be fun to talk to them in the millennial era. Verse 7. I don't know, I'm having a thing with chapter lately. Okay, verse 7. The cow and the bear shall feed, their young ones shall lie down together, and the lion shall eat straw like the ox. So apparently the lion is going to become a vegetarian. That's interesting. Church doctrine, animals will become vegetarians, I guess. And the sucking child shall play on the hole of the asp, and the weaned child shall put his hand on the cockatrice's den. And of course, that means that the little child who's still nursing or the child who's weaned, also very young, can put their hand on an asp and I think a cockatrice are both snakes. So, a little kid can hang out by a snake nest and moms don't need to worry. Feel free to hang out by the snake nest. You will not get hurt. And this could be literal, which I'm sure it is, but I think it could also be like symbolic, that you don't need to worry about your little children being harmed in, walking down an alleyway or whatever. There aren't the dangers that there are in this earth that we live in now when we get to the millennial era. Of course, we're all excited for that. And yes, that'll be great. Verse 10, and in that day there shall be a root of Jesse, which shall stand for an ensign of the people. To it shall the Gentiles seek, and his rest shall be glorious. So the Gentiles are going to seek for the root of Jesse. And it shall come to pass in that day that the Lord shall set his hand again the second time to recover the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria and from Egypt and from Pathros and from Cush and from Elam and from Shinar and from Hamath and from the islands of the sea. So I think that's saying like everybody, right? Like God's going to be looking to gather everybody. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. So God loves all of his children. He may have, covenant people, the Jews, and but he's really trying to gather everybody. And this ensign of the nation that he's setting up, as Latter-day Saints, we see ourselves in this imagery. We see our prophets as leaders and prophets to the entire world. I say prophets because we've had multiple of them. I'm not saying we have like multiple of them right now, but over time we have multiple. We see the priesthood, the prophets and all the leaders and us, that we have as power to save the whole human race, and especially the priesthood that flows through the temples, which is available to men and women as helping to save the human race. I know we might look like nice, innocent, naive, cute little Mormons over here, but we're actually trying to save the world in a way. We also see the gospel as taught to the restored church as a gift for all of humanity that are willing to receive it. We are here as servants, as teachers, as leaders, as helpers for all of humanity. Okay. Verse 13, the envy of Ephraim also shall depart, and the adversaries of Judah shall be cut off. Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. And I'm sure if we had a scholar with us, we could get something way cooler than what I'm about to say. But when I look at this verse, Ephraim shall not envy Judah, and Judah shall not vex Ephraim. Again, maybe it's talking about something way cooler. But what I see is that just one group of people and another group of people, there's not going to be envy between them or between individuals. And there won't be bullying either. One group will not vex another group. So no one's going to be jealous and no one's going to be pushing other people around. Hopefully there's going to, not hopefully, there is going to be equality and love and like teamwork, a sense of common humanity amongst all of us. And just as a little aside, I know that Christ is powerful and he can, by the stroke of his hand, make any of this happen. But I do believe he's going to require our cooperation, that our heart and our willingness to help him with our hands is going to be required. I don't think he's just going to magically make everybody be nice to each other. The knowledge of the Lord, our willingness to worship him, we're going to be willing to be these kinds of people, not bullying other people or envying other people, right? So why wait for some future date? Why not work on it now? I think that's a good idea. Okay, verse 14, but they shall fly upon the shoulders of the Philistines toward the west, and they shall spoil them of the east together, and they shall lay their hands upon Edom and Moab, and the children of Ammon shall obey them. And the Lord shall utterly destroy the tongue of the Egyptian sea, and with his mighty wind he shall shake his hand over the river, and shall smite it in the 7 streams, and make men go over dryshod. And there shall be a highway for the remnant of his people, which shall be left from Assyria, like as if it were to Israel in the day when he came up out of Egypt. So what I get out of the last few verses is he's in charge, he's powerful, and he's going to deliver anyone that's in captivity. And I don't, get anything more terribly specific out of that. But that all equals good stuff, right? So again, the whole point of Isaiah is hope. Hope for the future. God is in charge. Christ is powerful. We can trust the process. But, the message for me is I want to be on their side. So I need to try to be like them. Seems again, like a good idea. All right, I promised you guys a quote from someone who respects the Book of Mormon that you might like, and it is from the Pulitzer Prize winning American historian Daniel Walker Howe, not a member of the church, but definitely somebody who has a brain. He's not a Latter-day Saint, but he has a brain. Whew, cool. He said, "True or not, the Book of Mormon is a powerful epic written on a grand scale with a host of characters, a narrative of human struggle and conflict, of divine intervention, heroic good and atrocious evil, of prophecy, morality, and law. Its narrative structure is complex." And he further said the Book of Mormon should rank among the great achievements of American literature. So for anyone that feels to just kind of dismiss it because they don't, see the significance of it, that quote is, to help maybe refocus your thoughts, maybe increase your willingness. I will go ahead and put that quote below in the description, and I look forward to reading with you and being your study buddy next time. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.